And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me on this smoggy St. Jean Baptist weekend. It is something outside. I don't know if there were any early risers this morning. I was up early walking the dog, and boy, oh boy, we saw the sun. It was a fiery red. Really something to see. So hopefully you're staying safe. Try to stay indoors if you can. All right, coming up on the first half of the show, if you love them, leave them lists. I'll be talking to author Catherine Rahal, who will help us navigate the difficult conversations about organizing our affairs. And we're going to discuss how to prepare a roadmap or legacy notebook serving as a guide for loved ones and professional representatives. And on the second half of the show, how do we get rid of all our stuff? We're all guilty of it. Our stuff accumulates over the years. And have you reached the point where it controls you and not the other way around? You're going to want to be listening in after the 4:30 news, because we're going to be talking downsizing tips and how to get rid of all that stuff as we head into the summer months. A special program note. You know, the St. Jean Baptist weekend for Life Unrehearsed is always filled with mixed emotions for me, because it's my last show before I head into summer break. Life Unrehearsed will not be aired in July and August, but I'm going to be back in September, refreshed and ready to go. All right, we've discussed many topics on Life Unrehearsed over the years, including the importance of estate planning and succession. Time and time again, we hear stories of people not wanting to deal with these sensitive topics. Well, there's a book called If You Love Them, Leave Them Lists. It recently won an Independent Publisher Book Award, and Catherine Rahal is the author of this book. It's an easy read, great book, and their issues are increasingly important that are very easy to implement. Well, Catherine joins me in studio. Catherine, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, thanks for coming in on Sunday here. And now the title of your book, I love it, If You Love Them, Leave Them Lists. Why is it important to leave your loved ones these lists?
It's very hard to negotiate an estate if you don't have the information that you need. And even if you're acting as a caregiver or a mandatory, you are going to need certain things. When one of my close friends, I did that role, all three, power of attorney, mandatory, and executor for my friend. I had a notebook, and the first thing at the top of the page was her social insurance number, because I needed it for everything. And then there were so many other things that we didn't know how to handle, even when she was still alive. But she had Alzheimer's. She couldn't tell us. So you need those things to help you out. So
important. We're going to talk a lot about the contents of the book, what things we could think about. But, you know, it is, just listening to you, it makes perfect sense. These issues are so important, but many people are reluctant just to even deal with it. Why is that?
People don't like talking about mortality. It's in North American society, I think, more than in some other places, it's a taboo topic. So we're reluctant to address it. Obviously, we don't want to think about our own mortality, you know, and when you're 25 or 30, you think you're going to live forever, but it does creep up on you. But even as you get older, there may be one picture in the mirror, but you see yourself differently, and you don't think of yourself as aging, and you think you've got a lot of time. For many of us, it's true, but sometimes it isn't. And I had a specific case where a neighbor came and bought the book from me, thought he had lots of time, hadn't filled it out yet, and 4 months later dropped dead of a massive heart attack. He was in his late 70s. It was very unexpected. So you really never know. And I think there comes that point in your life where you have to make some kind of arrangement. And whether you do it with a book like this, or you have a list, or you have something, but you need to have something there for those people who are going to come and take care of you or clean up after you.
Talking to Catherine Rahal. She's the author of If You Love Them, Leave Them Lists, and we're here on Life Unrehearsed. Catherine, you are right. You know, we tend to want to put it off. You're dealing with, and we hear you say mortality, but really, this is just the basics. We need to not leave our loved ones not knowing these important issues, but we tend to do put it off. Now, I love your book, the way it's designed. It's an easy read, but it's just not a book, right? It's a workbook, and I love the fact that you could actually put your information, your list, right in your book, and you divide the organization of your affairs into different categories. So I want to address some of these categories, and let's start with the category of people.
Many of us have so many people in our lives, and we don't keep lists other than maybe an address book. But the most important people to list are, first and foremost, the people who are going to represent you. So that's going to be the person who holds your power of attorney, your mandatory. The mandatory is the person who will replace you if you become incapacitated. They will act as you. Or your executor or liquidator, as we say in Quebec. People need to know who they are. So it could be your children, it could be friends, you could have an institution, a trust company. There are a number of different ways to set that up. But whoever that person is should be listed so that whoever starts to take over from you will at least know who to deal with. If they themselves are the executor, for example, or the liquidator, then they should know that they're listed there, and they'll have everybody else, because you need to list all the people you want notified, all the people that you do business with. Who's your bank manager? Who's your investment advisor? Who's your doctor? What pharmacy are you using? The list goes on. Who's the vet for your cat or your dog? Who are your caregivers? If you're being taken care of, and you have a company coming in to do that, who's that company? Who's the contact person there? So all of those things need to be in there. Who are your legal people? Who's your notary? Who's your lawyer if you have one? Who's your accountant? The accountant could be important.
Mm-hmm. Just listening to, and this is just the one category of people, and you've rattled off a dozen of them. So very important. And one of the other categories that you talk about is paper. What do you mean by that?
By paper, I mean all of the documents that are important in your life. We're talking about civil documents. So you're talking about birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce decrees, trust agreements. If you are widowed, the death certificate of your spouse that passed away. If you have a child, for example, an adult child who's incapacitated and will need to be taken care of after you're gone, any arrangements that are made for that child should be written somewhere. And so all of that should be there as well. The most important thing is, where are those papers? Your will. Where's your will? Where's your power of attorney? Where's your mandate? People have to be able to find them. And I can tell you from experience that is not always the case. That's not always easy to find.
You mentioned communicate to the person that might be your liquidator, executor, mandator, but that should be immediately followed by, here's where you could find this.
Exactly right. Just a little aside. My father passed away, and when my mother was being moved to a residence, I needed to open a line of credit because we didn't know how quickly the house would sell. And in order to do that, I needed to produce my father's death certificate. And I had very carefully put everything in one container where everything was that I would have needed. My mother, in her wisdom, took it out. It took me 3 hours to find it, and I found it in the bottom of a drawer in a back bedroom.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Del Vecchio here. And that's Catherine Rahal. She's the author of If You Love Them, Leave Them List. And one more before we head out to traffic, Catherine. And I think this is very relevant these days, especially one of the categories that you put your book into is digital footprint.
We all have a bigger one than we think we have. Every time you go and try to buy something online, you are asked to put in your email. That'll give you a 10% or 15% coupon. So, why not? That's another place where you've signed up. If you think about it, you've got social media, you've got email, you've got all kinds of shopping things from Amazon to, let's say you buy your vitamins online, all of those things. You might be hooked up with a library. You could have subscriptions to software like Microsoft Office. Your utilities. I pay my hydro bills online. You know, my phone bill and my internet bills, I get those bills online, and so I have accounts there. If you have an alarm system in your house, where are the codes? And if you are still looking for love, you might be on a dating site, and that's one that you may or may not want your family to know about. So that's something to think about as well. If you are cleaning up after someone, keep the phone and keep it active, because you never know when you will need the contacts that are in that phone. It's all part of your digital footprint. If there are websites that you're on that you don't want your family to know about, delete them while you can. Or designate a very trusted friend to do that for you if something happens to you.
All very, very relevant and important points, and probably points we might not have even discussed 5, 10, 15 years ago in this changing world. Catherine, we do have to head out to traffic, but when we come back, it's important to start these lists where I'm listening to you and it all makes a lot of sense. But as we talked about, we tend to put it off. So, we shouldn't wait. We know we shouldn't wait, but we... And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Del Vecchio here, and I'm talking to Catherine Rahal, author of If You Love Them, Leave Them list. Catherine, you were bringing up some very good points about what we should be thinking about instead of just keeping it in our minds. Now, we both agree that most people will tend to delay these decisions and putting it all together, but we really shouldn't. We know that. So what advice can you give to get the ball rolling?
Take it one step at a time. One of the reasons that we broke the book into sections is so that it is a big job to get all that stuff written down. So we tried to break it down so you could attack it a little bit at a time. It also gives you perhaps an opportunity to sit down with your family and say, okay, today I'm going to talk to you about the people in my life. And you do that section. And then another time you will do the paper section, and another time you'll do the money section. And so that they know where all your stuff is, you know, the banks, the accounts, the investments, and who takes care of those things for you. And it's also good for people to know if somebody owes you money, because it would be nice if it came back to your estate instead of, somebody will say, oh, they're dead, I don't care anymore. But no, they still owe the money.
Very interesting, and I'm sure that happens actually often. I just want to reinforce about that's what I love about your book, Catherine, is because it's just not a book, right? It's a workbook. You've divided it into categories. You could go into each category, fill it out, and there you are. You're leaving your loved one's list. Now, we tackled a couple just before traffic. We talked people, we talked paper and digital footprint. You mentioned money, so I want to. Could you tell us about the money section of the book?
It's very important to make sure that your family knows where your money is, who's your bank, who's your banker, because they're going to need some of that money in order to deal with your things. If you have insurance policies, they need to know where those are. My mother always said, give with a warm hand. And so if you are going to gift things to your family and you're not needing it anymore, whether it's funds or things, give it to them while you're still alive, because they could probably use it now. And the other thing is, where are the documents that go with all of those things? Either money that you owe, money that's owed to you, and where the accounts are. Where are you keeping all of those things? Do you have all of those things together? Is your will in the top drawer and your money stuff in the second drawer? Are they all in the same place? Just make sure that you note for all of these things, where is it? Where did they find it?
And update it, right? Because these things do change. And when we were talking off air, you talked about handling our estates in Quebec, which is a little different than the rest of the country. And it can get complicated, can't it? So what advice would you have for handling our estates in Quebec?
My best advice for the average person is to make your will through a notary. Do your documents with a notary. We're fortunate in Quebec that if you have a notarial will or a legal will that's registered with the Chambre des Notaires, you don't have to go to probate. You have to pay for a will search, but it's a lot less expensive than going to probate. because I have been through that on the Ontario side, and it takes much longer, and so on and so forth. So a notarial will is probably the best way to go. And the second important thing is, and it's true everywhere, is be as organized as possible to help the people who are doing that work.
We're talking with Catherine Rahal here on Life Unrehearsed, and Catherine's the author of If You Love Them, Leave Them lists. You know, Catherine, you might have heard on our second half today, we're talking about how do we get rid of all our stuff and downsizing tips and so on. However, in this context as well, you talk a little bit about decluttering in your book. If You Love Them, Leave Them list. So why is decluttering important? What can we do?
Getting rid of the things you're no longer using makes more space for you and makes it a lot easier for those coming behind you to clear up after you. If you have things that your family wants, great, pass it on now if you're not using it. And it's getting tougher and tougher to get rid of stuff because we all have so much and we're living longer. Our kids don't necessarily want our stuff. They've already bought their own. So what do? That lovely dining room set that you just really adored when you bought it and you think it's wonderful doesn't have the same value. Emotional value and sale value are two very different things.
It's so true. And we're going to be expanding a lot on what you just mentioned in our second half interview as Stephanie's in studio with us. And I see her nodding, saying yes. So decluttering, and it goes back to your point, try to tackle it. Not just, the decluttering part, but start it. So get these lists started and as mentioned, your guide, if you will, is one way to go about that. Now, Catherine, we mentioned it briefly. We've had some notaries on the show, Life Unrehearsed, before, and it's amazing how many people don't even have wills. First of all, it's like over 50%, and it's mind-boggling if you think about it. But the notaries are always stressing, make sure you revise your wills. And you take that a step further, right? I mean, you need to revise your lists.
You do. Particularly, think about how many times you might need to change a password. So make sure that if you have a password list, that it's kept up to date so that people know what to do. If people don't have your passwords, for example, Facebook can be memorialized, but you can't delete the account. Apple, if you don't have the user ID and password for your Apple ID, Apple is not really cooperative with helping you get it, even if you have a will. And there have been cases that have come up in the news that's happened. So you want to make sure you've got all of that and make sure it's up to date. And that's true too. You might decide you're not going to bank with one bank anymore and you're moving to another. Make sure you've changed that in your lists.
Very important points. Catherine, we are running out of time, and your book is so valuable, as you're aware. I'm in the world of dealing with adult children and seniors in their life transitions, and we have had so many conversations about exactly what you're talking about here, and leave them list. It is simple, but not necessarily easy to deal with, but you just have to, focus and
bite the bullet
and get it done. And your book is just wonderful to be able to do that and organize people. So how can our listeners get your book? If You Love Them, Leave Them lists.
I guess the easiest is to go to my website. It's catherinerahal.com. And there's a link there to buy it from a local printer, or there's Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Chapters Indigo. And it's available also in ebook format for Kindle, Kobo, Nook, and iBooks.
Wonderful. And I must congratulate you, a recent award winner, what they call an IPPY award, which is an independent publisher book award for your book. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
All right. That's Catherine Rahal, the author of If You Love Them, Leave Them lists. All right. And available in French too, by the way.
Yes.
Everything is
available in French as well.
Yep. Excellent. Next up on Life Unrehearsed, how do we get rid of all our stuff? Not just our list now. We're going to get into everything in the house or the condo, and it does tend to accumulate. Well, we've got Stephanie Cadieux, who's going to be joining me to offer tips and recommendations to get rid of our stuff and provide us some needed relief knowing that it's out of the house. And she's also going to be providing us with some valuable downsizing tips.